Welcome. Welcome to Holy Ground Spiritual Center's HIV Faith and Justice panel. You are in for a treat today. We will educate and inform and inspire. Those are the hopes for for today's event. This weekend, we will be extending a radical welcome to all of those with HIV or AIDS, those impacted by it, those who have heard about this, those who are unsure. We are here as Holy Ground Spiritual Center to explicitly and intentionally welcome you to our spiritual center. I am Reverend Melissa McQueen-Simmons, the virtual pastor of Holy Ground Spiritual Center. And we just automatically assume that everybody is in this space and you are welcome today. I have been a part of a program called HIV and Faith Ambassadors, which is with Wake Forest, the School of Divinity, amongst other partners. And we are clergy, medical professionals, lay leaders doing the work in North Carolina and beyond to let the world know that no matter who you are, no matter what your status, that there are places of faith that will affirm and celebrate you and give you the resources you need to help you on your journey. So today, I am here with none other than Reverend Cedric Harmon, who will moderate this panel for us. And I think, Cedric, before we get started, do you have anything you want to share before we get started? Because I think I want to play a song now. You want to share before the song or after? After? Okay. So, everyone, you know how we do at Holy Ground Spiritual Center. We take a moment to breathe, a moment to get balanced as best we can. And today, Kay Shante have given us something special for this occasion. It's called True Colors. So, as you prepare for our panel, use this moment to get centered wherever you are. Listen to the words and reflect on your true color. We'll be back shortly.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged. Oh, I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness inside of you can make you feel so small. But I see your true colors shine through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them see your true colors. True colors are beautiful, like the rainbow. They're beautiful. You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged. Oh, I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness inside of you can make you feel so small. But I see your true colors shining through. But I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them see your true colors, true colors.
We see your true colors, and you are beautiful. I'm bringing in my friend, y'all. I'm bringing in my friends. We missing one. We missing one friend. We are here. We are here. I hope you all were touched by that selection by Kay Shante as I was. We are here. All right, Reverend Cedric Harmon, you got it from here.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Melissa McQueen-Simmons. It's my pleasure to join with you and all who are viewing now and into the future. We welcome you to this panel discussion. We trust that you will indeed be educated, inspired, uplifted, and informed. My name is Reverend Cedric Harmon. I'm currently a partner at the Management Center where I work with social justice leaders to help create and support equitable, sustainable, and results-driven nonprofit organizations. Prior to that, I spent over a decade as the founder and executive director of Many Voices, a Black church movement for gay and transgender justice. We were based in Washington, D.C. I now live in Durham, North Carolina. And Reverend Melissa McQueen-Simmons and I did significant work with Many Voices, and Many Voices continues and will have a new way of being in the world moving into the future. That is my story in terms of a brief word of introduction. I'd like to invite Jeffrey Edwards Knight to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeff Edwards Knight, and I am elder at Holy Covenant United Church of Christ, and I also serve as the president of our consistory there. I am employed with Mecklenburg County, where I am the health program supervisor for our HIV, STI, sexually transmitted infections, prevention and education program. I also am a person with 37 years of lived experience with HIV, and I'm looking forward to our conversations today and to having fun and being informative. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff. I neglected to state that my pronouns that I prefer to use are he and him, just for clarification. Reverend Sonja Lee, I'd like to invite you to also introduce yourself, share a few words about who you are.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Holy Ground. You're doing great work in community. And I am Reverend Sonja Lee. My pronouns are she and her. And I am the founder and executive director of the Lionel Lee Jr. Center for Wellness. We support people who are uninsured, underinsured, and underserved. And we've our mission has been to support people who with chronic illnesses to ensure they receive the help that they need. I am I have been executive director since 2006. I'm still having connection issues, so please bear with me as we continue with the conversation.
Thank you so much. We are, I think, all based in North Carolina, and actually there's storms moving through our area, so there may be some connection challenges throughout. So we will just move right on through it, whatever comes our way. So I'd like to invite us into this conversation, and it is a conversation. There will be a series of questions that I will pose, and I may do some follow-up depending on the answers that you give. But I have a question that I think would help establish some context and ground us for the conversation. As you may know, in 1981, that was the first time that there was a published report of what we would now know as HIV and AIDS through the CDC and through our public health systems. 1981. In 1982, the CDC labeled this particular illness that they discovered the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. In 1984, it was identified that the cause was in fact a virus, and they identified that specific virus in 1984. Then in 1985, a test was developed to detect the virus prior to symptoms. Prior to that, we just knew about it on the basis of symptoms showing up. But in 85, an actual test was developed. And it wasn't until 1987, 6 years later than 1981, when AZT as a treatment was introduced. That was in 1987. Given that little bit of history, and we'll get into some more current history as we have the conversation, when was the first time you recall hearing about HIV?
Mm-hmm.
When was the first time you remember hearing HIV or hearing about HIV, hearing even the term, or hearing about this particular illness, if you knew about it prior to it even being labeled HIV? And let's see, let's start. I'm going to go in kind of reverse order. Pastor Sonja, when was the first time you recall?
Wow, that's a question that has me to go back in time a few decades. One of the things that I failed to mention in my introduction is that I am ordained in the Unity Fellowship Church movement, and based on your timeline and based on our history, our founding coincided the um, with the knowledge of the epidemic proportions of HIV. In 1982, our denomination's founder, Archbishop Carl Bean, may he rest in peace, um, founded the Unity Fellowship Church movement to serve those who were diagnosed with HIV and AIDS, mainly because he was, first of all, led to serve the community. And many institutions, families, healthcare providers, etc., um, would not treat people who were infected with HIV. And our ministry was founded during the epidemic. So I wanted to make sure that our listeners understand that our movement has been um, grounded in this work for decades now, since 1982. Um, when I first heard the term HIV and or AIDS, it was oh gosh, it had to be in the mid to late 80s. I can't recall exactly when that would have happened, but I lived in Washington D.C. at the time, and as you know, D.C. Is inundated with news and especially government related issues as far as the CDC, health department, etc. So I likely would have heard about HIV and AIDS in those settings. In Washington, D.C., statements issued by government agencies, and they any news around HIV and AIDS was always in the negative, and it was always related to the LGBTQ population. It was the gay disease, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that would be my first memories around how I heard about HIV and AIDS. And maybe perhaps the other part would have been in the club, authentic self. I would have heard some about it in the clubs. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. Jeff.
I can remember exactly the first time I heard anything about, before it was called HIV, that I heard about this disease. It was in the fall of 1981. I was at the College of Charleston at that time, and it was all over the news about there was these, excuse me, gay men dying of cancer,
Mhm.
and and all we heard was this is a disease that's affecting gay men. Well, let me be more precise, gay white men.
Mm.
Uh, so as a gay man, I didn't even, it didn't even faze me that has nothing to do with me. I'm a gay man, but that disease is affecting gay white men. So that really has nothing to do with me. So it was 1981, College of Charleston in the fall of '81, and that's when I first heard about it.
Thank you. Reverend Melissa.
So I lived in an apartment when I was a child, and those who know me may know that I am kind of social. So there was this man, very tall, slim, black man, kind of frail looking, and the neighbors and the adults would tell us kids don't go talking to him, leave him alone. um Someone was like he have the disease, he have AIDS, and somebody was like he's a drug addict, and all of us children was just like, okay, we really didn't know what a drug addict was. But I went over there and talked to him. I would always, when I saw him, and I would always ask him, did he want anything? Did he need anything? He had such a very quiet and gentle spirit. I didn't feel any threat by him even as an adolescent. And my mom was the candy lady. So, we had stuff that I could go just grab something and give him whatever he needed. And it was fine. When my family saw me talking to him, no one questioned anything. I guess they knew that's who I was. So that was the first time I heard about it. And I never looked it up because we wasn't Googling anything back then. Um, and I remember even when I had sex ed, when did I teach that in high school or something? They briefly talked about it there, but that was it. That's all I had.
Thank you for sharing these reflections. I think it is the context that we want to come out of. What I want to lift up from those sharings is, number one, that much of the conversation during the early days was steeped in confusion and secrecy and negativity and fear. Um, Much of it was because the context was this was a new illness, so there was a lack of knowledge and information. There were at least 6 years when there were no really effective treatments for this illness. That it had been couched in particular communities and not in all communities. That all of that led to a way of perceiving what it means to have AIDS, what it means to be HIV positive, what it means to live with that as a human being in a community that is confused, perplexed, fearful, and lacking in information.
Mhm.
Here we are in 2023, and what I want to suggest is some of those same realities exist today,
Mhm.
which is relatively shocking.
Yeah.
Very
Relatively
much so.
shocking that after all of these years, there is still lots of misinformation, lack of information, and lack of access.
Access. That's the word.
Lack of access.
I'm unmuted.
You are. So as you're doing your inward talk, we're hearing it.
Just call me the Amen Corner. Amen.
Amen.
So that gives us a context for the rest of our conversation. I think it sets us up for a really meaningful conversation. I also cannot skip over this. That Reverend Melissa's mama was the candy lady. And I want you to know that in every community, there was at least one, if not more, candy lady. And we all knew what that meant. So we didn't have to explain to anybody. And if y'all don't know what candy lady is, go find out. Go find somebody to tell you what that means. But it
For
meant
real.
something to the last one of us, because we knew.
The candy lady.
We know what that
With
means.
pickles. With pickles. With pickles.
All right. So now moving forward, I have another question. And Reverend Sonja, you kind of touched on this in your reflection. Illness, disease, being unwell, these are common human experiences. So my question is this: in what ways are positive messages, respectful conversations occurring in our communities about health in general and HIV in particular within our faith spaces? How are there positive messages, ways that positive, respectful conversations are occurring around health in general and HIV in particular in our faith spaces? And I will now reverse the order. Reverend Melissa.
I'm not ready.
Pass. You can do it. You have the capacity to pass. Passing is acceptable.
I got a little distracted.
Passing is acceptable. Also, we invite everyone to speak from their own experience, and I statements are very useful as opposed to generalizations. And also, I would invite, and we're already doing it, authenticity. So you can be authentic, and if there's something that you don't know, it's perfectly fine to say, I'm just not sure, I don't know. So let's then go to, let's see, Jeff, let's see your response to that question. You have a response?
Yes. What I've been seeing in my work, as I mentioned in my bio, I work for the health department, and my staff and I, we do education in STIs and HIV and sexually transmitted infections. And part of that work is with the faith-based communities. We've come quite a ways with the faith-based community, but I don't think as far as we need to. There's some churches that will have conversations about HIV, let you do presentations, even come in as someone with lived experience. But there are also other churches that I found that no, we're not going to talk about that. And I will speak from a personal experience I've had myself. I left the church for about 3 years because at the time I was hearing that HIV and AIDS, this was this punishment from God for this sin that you've committed, and it's getting rid of all the right people. And so I just felt at a point that I just became unworthy of love and God's acceptance. And I left the church. But I realized that sometime later, 3 years, that someone else determined what my relationship was with God. So went back to church, and started talking more. I even, in my church that I'm currently attending, Holy Covenant United Church of Christ, on World AIDS Day in 2018, I believe it was, I announced to the church that I was positive. As I was talking about World AIDS Day and what that was, and talked about my years of living with this, and got a standing ovation of applause, and people thanking me for telling my story. But I do know of other people who the church has really hurt them, faith-wise, emotionally, mentally, and so I think we still have a long ways to come, and as I feel in the church when we're talking about HIV in general. As far as health, we're doing a much better job with health, but I think when it comes to an illness that's related to sex, it's still seen, it's considered as some type of sin, as I've seen it. But I think we still have quite a ways to come when we're talking about HIV.
Appreciate it. Reverend Sonja.
Um, I'm responding to your question again, please.
Okay. Okay.
Question again.
I can do it again, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So illness and disease and being unwell, these are common human experiences. In what ways are positive messages, respectful conversations occurring about health in general, but about HIV in particular in faith spaces?
Okay, great. So I have noticed this and been a part of conversations, especially since moving to the South. And I have watched conversations and information be in our communities in much more positive lights than prior to my moving here. So, and I'm speaking specifically around some things, some cultural diet, for example, being the source of our illnesses, and we have I have noticed it, and conversations have evolved as we become more knowledgeable about diet and exercise, etc. Much of that has happened willingness of community-based organizations, and including churches and faith-based organizations, to have health fairs, for example. There was a health fair almost every month in our Charlotte Mecklenburg area. Issues around diet, exercise, access to health care. Those conversations over the years, I've seen it and again been a part of it. And there's become, especially during the pandemic, partnerships and collaborations have formed that were not previously happening. At least not in focus on our communities. They were happening perhaps in other communities, but not color. Communities are low income, low to moderate income. Partnerships formed with organizations that at one point they were just and had such different, what they thought were different missions, come together and recognize that as we work collaborative, positive impact. Now, I heard Jeffrey to speak about conversations around sex. I'm going to include that we just still, in our, especially in the Black church, we still refuse to broadly. There are some spaces, of course, where they're more progressive. For the most part, we will not talk about sex and drugs in our communities. Thank you, Reverend McQueen.
Wow.
Melissa.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I have been a part of the HIV and Faith Ambassador program out of Wake Forest School of Divinity. And it's been about almost, well, since October. And since I've been here for 8 years or so, 8 or 9 years, I haven't been in the space or have heard anything about this conversation aside from the sexuality education that I co-facilitate with Our Whole Lives. And that's another conversation, but I'm just putting it out there. And so when I received information about this, I knew this was something I wanted to do. So I'm going to read what the program is and who it involves. Um, it's cultivating a cohort of Black faith leaders, communities, and Black medical providers who collaborate for an anti-stigma HIV campaign, effectively disseminate HIV education, encourage early diagnosis, and link African American populations in North Carolina to care. Since I've been a part of this wonderful program, we have had retreats where they would bring in medical providers and professionals, coaches, if you will, theologians and professors that teach about sexual theology, sexual trauma enforced care, like things like that. Even last time they took us back to about our ancestors and how they have have went through what they went through, and some of that is passed on down to us. And we have lunch and learns where they would use a scripture or talk about the Bible and how we can use it. So I can share with you that the group of us, which also include pastors like myself, are having these conversations and trying to figure out what is the best way to tell the people of faith and the people who follow us to get tested, to get informed, and to know that there are people who care about you and your issues and your concerns when it comes to anything. So yeah, that's what I could share.
So, for our audience's sake, I want to kind of again take from these three reflections some highlights, going in reverse order and then kind of melding them together. So, there are currently, and in recent times, there are some really holistic, wholesome conversations that are happening. So, that needs to just be recognized. That there is not a complete vacuum. There are spaces and places in which conversations are occurring, where positive messages are being delivered, where inquiries are being responded to, and people are gaining knowledge. While at the same time, there remains in some quarters a lack of information, knowledge, and understanding, and an unwillingness to engage in conversation around certain topics because of quote unquote morality concerns. And issues and concerns around religion and religious teaching and religious dogma that gets in the way of actually addressing a health issue. And then there's also the ways in which we fear conversations around things that cause us to feel uncomfortable, around sexuality, around drugs, around drug usage, etc. And then finally, there is socioeconomic pressures that stifle our ability to have meaningful conversation that leads to real access and to real support around health. And then one other thing, there have been and continues to be a growing awareness in our communities, Black and Brown communities, around health disparities, which lead to us talking about diet, exercise, and other health promoting realities that are available to us, ways that we can support and live better, healthy lives. And yet, there is this hindrance around a disease that has been with us for over 40 years. The context I'm saying and suggesting is complicated and complex. Complicated and complex, especially in communities of color, and most especially in Black communities. Because if I'm not mistaken, Reverend Melissa, the target population happens to be Black spaces. Is that correct for Wake Forest?
Yes, we are intentional. They were intentional about that when it came to this program.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So in 2023, HIV is a manageable medical condition. I want to say this one more time. In 2023, HIV is a manageable medical condition. So simplicity. We did not originally start with it being a manageable medical condition, but it is now. How did that happen? Well, after 1987, with the introduction of AZT as a treatment, it wasn't the best and most effective treatment, but it did prolong life a little bit, and it addressed some of the underlying causes for HIV moving rapidly to AIDS, which AIDS actually resulted in multiple deaths in our communities and across the world. But in 1990, antiretrovirals were introduced. And then in 1996, HART, protease inhibitors, were introduced. Those protease inhibitors addressed the underlying virus and reduced the replication of the virus within the human body. Not unlike COVID, there was rapid development of an awareness that if we can stop the replication of the virus within the body, we can prolong life. That didn't happen until 1996. Protease inhibitors. They have saved multiple thousands of lives, and in actuality, really millions of lives. Protease inhibitors actually meant a one-pill combination drug. Take one pill a day with this combination of drugs, it will inhibit the replication of the virus in your body. AZT was not that. Antiretrovirals were not that, but protease inhibitors became that. With antiretrovirals, sometimes people were taking up to 20 pills a day just to stay alive. But now it's one pill a day regimen with multiple medications in that one pill. And you can live because the virus is not being replicated in your body, to the point that you cannot detect the virus in your body, in your bloodstream at all.
Hallelujah.
We have made significant progress to cause HIV to be a manageable medical condition. In 2012, PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, and PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis. These are pills that you can take with pre, you can take it before you have a sexual encounter that might result in an infection. And then post, you can take a pill after you've had a sexual encounter that could have resulted in an exposure. These medications came available and are in wide use in many populations since 2012. So HIV is a manageable medical condition. Okay, so this is the reality. There are medications, there are treatments available. And we're very close. We do now have injections where you can take an injection for 30 days. In the last 30 days, you go back and take another injection. You don't have to take a pill. So these realities are present. However, given that it's a manageable medical condition, what would you say is the impact upon HIV/AIDS awareness now and practices of prevention now? Given that it's a manageable medical condition in 2023, what do you think is the impact upon practices to prevent and awareness around HIV? Let's go. Okay, let's try Jeff, see what happens.
Okay. Yes. Very good information, Cedric. And yes, for PrEP, the pre-exposure prophylaxis, where you just at this point can take one pill a day, or as you mentioned, you can, if they're injecting, the injectable PrEP is available, which is Apretude. And I'll say that in Mecklenburg County, if you are uninsured and you're interested in PrEP, you can get PrEP for free if you're uninsured. All you to the health department, and I am the county lead for that in Mecklenburg County. So just wanted to say that. And if you're interested in post-exposure prophylaxis. But all of these practices have been great. And the impact is what we're seeing with PrEP in the people of, as it relates to people of color, our Black and brown people. We are seeing more folks involved in getting on PrEP, but mainly those are people in the LGBTQ community, who the population we are not reaching are Black women. And we so many messages around PrEP that um, where it's targeted or the audience for it is men who have sex with men. We don't really see a lot of advertisements or information as it relates to Black women. So I just want to state we're definitely missing that population. Um, and I think part of the impact that PrEP and PEP has had, because with PEP, the post exposure prophylaxis, as you mentioned, you can take after you've had a sexual encounter, but you only have 72 hours after that sexual encounter to take PEP. Otherwise, it's not effective. Um, and so we see that in some cases, PrEP has been um, something that's been very helpful, but in some cases, is people have argued that now that we have PEP, that's just giving people permission to just have sexual activity anytime they want to, any way they want to, without protection. And without protection, I mean without the use of a condom. Um, so there has been a negative and a positive impact because of PrEP and PEP. But I am a big supporter of PrEP and PEP. Um, and I will say to anyone who's on it that just be aware that HIV is not the only STI that's out you can contract by having unprotected sex.
Thank you. Reverend Sonja.
Wow, excellent points. I thank you. Those true facts. I think from dealing with the through the wellness center and through the church, I think the impact of the manageability of HIV and AIDS, all of the treatments have progressed over the years. I think the infection being manageable, focus has shifted to other areas of concern for our community. When I think about requests that we receive for assistance, seldom does any or any other HIV we have the questions around treatment or services have so which says to me that the focus has shifted to issues, especially those around survival in this inflationary environment. So people are more concerned organization again, and this is from my lived experience throughout organization. People are more food, basic needs, food, nutrition, shelter, the rising costs of rents in the Charlotte area. All of these things have or shifted the focus from HIV, especially given with the numbers coming down as far as rates of infection go, the numbers of infection. Cedric, again, I did some research in around it that there are 1.8 million people, or there were, to HIV in the United States. So given that our population is what 300, that feels like a very low number with a very low impact. Has shifted from care and concern around HIV. So the manageability of the disease is a bar as the health of our communities, and it also shifted the focus. And I think as a result of that, treatments that are available are not being accessed at rates that they could be, reduce the rates of infection. Mixed bag. Black women, the focus, absolutely no focus on Black women. So Black trans women are also being kind of overly concerned about how trans people play sports versus our trans community. What bathroom will they use? Well, please. So the focus has shifted to so many other areas. I think that manageability has had that impact.
Thank you both for your responses on this. I intentionally, if you can on camera see, I wore this red ribbon. I think you can see it. Yeah. We may have, I think that this particular panel will have real recognition around the red ribbon. And I put it on this morning. I've had this one, well, since the 90s, I think the early 90s. And I put it on this morning, and I was putting it on, I remembered there was a time in the United States of America when it was almost ubiquitous. You would see people wearing their ribbons on their clothing. At churches, you would see them. And at every award show, like the Oscars, the Emmys, the Tonys, almost every recipient and presenter had on a red ribbon. And what that said to me is at that period of time, awareness and commitment to addressing HIV/AIDS in the world was a top priority issue. At one point, it was the primary focus. And one of the reasons that it was the primary focus was because we saw the devastation that it had caused within communities. We actually understood the impacts of HIV/AIDS on human beings at a higher level at that period of time. And I think that both of you have kind of indicated, while we have made significant progress around treatment and really effective treatments and causing this to be a manageable disease, the manageability has quieted much of the conversation and focus, and it has shifted to other things. What I also, when I put it on this morning, I realized this is 2023, and in 2020, the entire world shifted its focus to a rampant virus that was spreading across the world, COVID. And you could not go anywhere without hearing conversation around COVID. And here we are approaching May of 2023, and once again, our focus is shifting away from a virus that has caused devastation. What I want to suggest is our attention span is so fleeting. So fleeting on things that matter, things of life and death, things of prospering and thriving. But we get caught up in other issues and other things so quickly. COVID is not gone. HIV is not gone. Maybe manageable to some degree in both instances, but not gone. Because viruses, their entire intention and focus, their purpose, viruses seek to continue to exist. So as human beings, we must continue to focus on addressing and combating them. But our attention span is so fleeting. Okay, so treatment as prevention. I think we all know this phraseology. It's very popular, especially in health communities and among public health circles. Treatment as prevention. What does treatment as prevention mean to you? And after stating what it means to you, In what ways or how could communities of faith advance treatment as prevention within Black communities? You got a compound question here. And this time, I'm not going to call on anybody. I'm going to let somebody volunteer. I invite you to volunteer. Who would like to tackle it first?
I'll tackle first.
Okay.
For me, treatment as prevention means that in order to prevent the spread of, in this case, HIV, um, treatment folks need to take medications, take them as they're supposed to, as they're prescribed, and have adherence to them so that that individual is able to be undetectable. Therefore, they're not able to transmit HIV to another individual. Or PrEP is considered for me to be treatment as prevention. If you're taking PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is the pill or the injection we mentioned earlier that will prevent you from contracting HIV from someone, or PEP as far as the same reason. That is what's considered to me to be treatment as prevention, and how that could impact communities of faith to advance PrEP and PEP usage in Black communities. I think there would have to be an understanding that this is not about sex, it's not about sin, it's not about God's judgment. This is about saving our people. Um, and and I think sometimes in this we forget about the main thing, which is God's love. So in advancing this in our communities of faith, I think we have to be willing to have these conversations. We have to have open, honest conversations about HIV, about treatment, and why that's important to people in our communities, in our Black and Brown communities. Um, we know that the church has been and probably will continue to be the backbone of our culture. And it's I think it's really important that in order for one to help with the decrease of people of color contracting this, that we're going to have some messages in our from our church, conversations in our church that are positive conversations and not conversations um, of putting folks down and looking at this as always something negative. Uh, and I think for PrEP and PrEP and PEP to be advanced in our communities.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm gonna take a stab at this one coming from me. I'm coming from me. So when I hear treatment as prevention, that was it, right? Okay. And the other part of that was how could faith communities handle that in so many words? That's what you said? Okay. Advanced treatment. There we go. So for me, and I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of what Jeff said. So I believe treatment as prevention is people being aware, having the knowledge of what tools is available for them as they just navigate life, period. Okay. That's how I see this. And when it comes to Black faith spaces, I believe, and in all faith spaces, I believe there's opportunities for faith leaders, lay leaders, whatever your title is, whoever is talking the most in your congregation, to create opportunities that talk about how sacred our bodies are, that talk about the sacredness of healthy relationships with others, mind, body, and spirit, because I believe that's the conversation that is missing, especially now as we think about this gun violence that's taken our bodies out. Like, there's so many things happening that has to do with our bodies, and a lot of people do not even bring it up in their faith space. Um, just as Pastor Sonja Lee mentioned about our trans bodies, and you know, as and someone and you said about our attention span being short, but yeah, we got trans bodies, and they're concerned about what sport they play and who they play with, while all of our bodies are in need of care, you know. And for me, what does that look like in a faith space? It looks like having conversations that are sex positive. It looks like having conversations that are body positive, because that matter too. We know that, you know, if people don't see their body represented, they don't think they count. They don't think it matters. The conversation matters to them. And I'm going to dig a little bit deeper when it comes to our bodies in these faith spaces. Um, if we're going to talk about how sacred our bodies are, it also looks like it shows up in the food that we share in our faith spaces. From the fried chicken to, y'all know what y'all be sharing, and what we have after, you know, I'm not going to say, but you know, the same old meal that's fried with green beans, mashed potatoes, potato salad, you know, the stuff. So we
Well,
talk about what we're putting in our bodies in that way too. So for me, when I hear treatment as prevention, and I think about our beautiful Black bodies, I'm thinking about how are all the ways we can take care of our bodies. So, because knowing if we're taking care of our bodies, and we know that to live a life in the fullness thereof is to be in relationship with the divine and ourselves and others. If we're taking care of ourselves and we're with other people, we're also taking care of their bodies too. So that's where I am when it comes to this response of treatment as prevention in faith spaces.
Right. I'd like to say what they said. Um, what they said. I thank you. Thank you both for the holistic approach as prevention. And just to share briefly, I took it to Atlanta. I, I was one of maybe 10 people on the full flight in this enclosed space with it. There had to be at least 100 on the flight, at least. And how surprised I was at that, but not so surprised I was going to remove mine. Protect, understand the sacredness of my body and the importance of my health. But to the person that I was sitting next to, and as well as the visit, as well as everyone along the way, we ourselves accountable, and I believe fleeting attention span. I think as our numbers and think, oh well, everything's okay. That is can't be further from the truth. Thing I want to add is with the PrEP and the available now, have the courage to use them, willingness to say, "Hey, doc, I'm sexually active," or if I'm a if I'm someone that's an IV drug user, I still have to take care of myself, and I implore to emphasize the personal accounts, the resources that are available. We talk a lot about access to sources and access to affordable health care. I just talk about free PrEP. Just check in with the health department for the asking. So there is a level of personal responsibility that I want to do. I also want to encourage our lay leaders, clergy, etc. Space is safe enough for people to say that don't know to say, hey, safe. I know that I'm sexually active. I know that I'm in position. I'm at risk. Help me to help myself. And I don't know that our so-called affirming spaces and our community-based organizations and our departments, I don't know that people feel safe. I know for a fact that many don't. I can say that. So we must continue to have these conversations. We have in our community, especially in the Charlotte Mecklenburg area, I can speak about vast resources. So if we're faith leaders, for example, there are we can reach out to for professionals to come in, the professional caregivers, information around PrEP and how to use it, how to access it and use it. We instances that can say, well, yes, I've been living with HIV for 20 years and blah blah. Have the willingness and the courage to come out. And so I think when we continue to have these conversations, I think that to do just that.
Thank you all for your rich sharing and your reflections on this question. Just to highlight a couple of things. One would be that the church functions as a cultural backbone. And I love that phrasing. It's a cultural backbone for us because it houses much of our culture in the ways that we be in the world. But that's a responsibility. It's not just a bumper sticker. So that means, therefore, that the church and communities of faith have a responsibility as that cultural backbone to do everything to strengthen that backbone and like strengthening our core and our bodies to make sure that we continue to be upright and move forward. In the absence of that, we fall apart. So our communities of faith have a responsibility. I think the other thing is this notion of we have not because we ask not, but we may not be able to access a space where it's safe to ask. And so creating communities of faith where it's safe for people to ask for what they need. You know, we have scripture, we quote scripture all the time, this scripture, that God shall supply all of your needs, that the divine shall supply all of your needs. Well, our medical and our health and our dietary needs are a need. So if God has supplied free access to PrEP, and you have need of it, access it. And it's the responsibility of communities of faith to share that it's available. So if all you can do is say, it's available at the health department, say that. Someone in your congregation may need that information. Do not become a keeper of the information, but be a repository so that it can be shared because people have need. And you have been given access to information. And if you don't know where to find the information, conversations like this provide you access. And Holy Ground Spiritual Center in this instance is providing an access point to gain information and access to resources so that you can better serve your communities. I think the final thing around body positivity and sex positivity led me to my next question. Currently across the United States of America, access to comprehensive sexuality education is becoming more and more limited. And in many places, it's not available at all. What impacts do you see access to comprehensive sexuality education? What impact would that have on HIV prevalence? What benefits do you think it could provide to our communities to have comprehensive sexuality education. Now, I know that that can be a hot button topic, but I intentionally want to ask about it because it's so important. So, what would you say? What would be some benefits that you could see of access to comprehensive sexuality education around addressing HIV prevalence? What would you say? And who would like to go first?
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about it. Yes, it's missing. It's missing. Oh my goodness. Like the impact it could have on our children, our adolescents, our young adults, our older adults, our seasoned adults. Like it could have so much impact. I am grateful to be one of the trainers that teach and share and facilitate our whole lives, which is a sexuality education program in our faith that was created with the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalists. And what I do is I go to different places and I teach adults how to teach sexuality and our faith to kindergartners all the way to older adults, because there's so much out there that we can learn about our bodies, and we're not teaching people how to have sex, but we're teaching people how to honor and respect. We're teaching people how to know their worth and know their value within their body. We're teaching people how to create boundaries and how to be knowledgeable when they are around people who are not safe. So, yes, we need to talk about sex. I'm in Generation X. And no, they didn't talk about sex in the church. What they talked about, don't get pregnant. Okay, how am I not going to get pregnant if we don't talk about how to get pregnant? Like, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? So, yes, we need to talk about sex. It could have so much impact, and the benefits will be people will know that some things exist that can protect them. I'm almost ready to pull out some condoms and something, like that can protect them. I'm gonna pull out one. When I teach, when I do sexuality in our faith, and we pull out this internal condom, people are mind blown that this can be something that can be used for anybody in various places. Like, come on, you all, come on, pastors, we got to do it. Hire me, book me, book Cedric. We can do the sex talk in your church. And if you don't think it need to be in your church, we can do it somewhere else. We need to talk about sex.
Anyone else want to respond?
Dropping mics. I'm dropping all mics.
That one, we can drop the mic red on that one. I am so there with having conversations, especially with our young folks. I have to say, as a senior, we need to have some talk about sex well, I'm just saying, but let's talk about sex. Is that I would be concerned. I don't know who's teaching my kid and what they're teaching my kid about sexuality. That for me, if I'm sending sending my child to a classroom that doesn't line up with my belief system, and I think that's why this complex and such a hot button topic in communities across around the world. But I can only speak about where I live. That is a hot button, mainly for me. I don't want my kid to hear about on LGBTQ or any of that. And the only thing you know is God made Adam and Eve. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna need a well-rounded with the educators and a look at the curriculum before I can. But we need to have the conversations. So how do we have the conversation? Killing each other. How do we have the conversations without pride in our communities? Is that even current climate? I believe when we come from a non-judge place of love, and we talk about our bodies, some things it's pretty, there's that, but there's also the complexities of sexuality and the nuances that everybody just doesn't get or agree upon. This is a conversation that we need to continue to have. We need to continually have. Leave that right there.
Jeff, anything?
And I actually don't know what more I can add to that, because Reverend Melissa and Sonja, I'm telling you, you all just hit it right on the head. And I'm going to say kudos for saying internal condom instead of female condom. They're internal and external. And you can get them for free at the health department. I just want to throw that out there. So, but the education is very important. We have, especially in our schools, and I know that is really, as has been mentioned, a hot topic. Sexual education in the schools and when you should start, and who can do that. But having individuals from our health department who I know go into at least the high schools and do some sexual education, because for a long time it was abstinence only and we couldn't talk about anything other than that. But it's vitally important for our young folks, for our high school folks. I'm a baby boomer, so for our seasoned individuals, because we're seeing in our nursing homes the rate of STDs and STIs increasing, because people are acting like seasoned adults aren't involved in sex activity. So all of this education is very important. And again, part of it, as has already been mentioned, needs to happen where in our churches we can have those positive conversations around our bodies, and what that means. And I think all of those things will help with the prevalence of HIV, and it'll be very impactful. But we have to care about our bodies, be okay with our bodies, and respect our bodies, and know that we are worth being respected, and that our bodies are important, and that body image.
Thank you all for your responses on this question. Reverend Melissa, I want to do a time check. Where are we on time? Are we 5 minutes? Thank you. All right, 5 minutes. So, Pastor Sonja, Reverend Melissa, Jeff, you responded to the question in very powerful ways. I want to appreciate what you surfaced. And one of the things that Reverend Sonja surfaced is a very earnest and truthful response to comprehensive sexuality education. Just saying the words out loud can cause people to feel a little uncomfortable. So what does that actually mean? Well, Reverend Melissa and I have a shared sense of what that means. from the curriculum that we teach, and this is what we mean by it. Number one, we mean that it is age appropriate sexuality education. So what you teach a person K through 1 is not what you teach a person as a senior. You teach them different things because there are different stages of development, need, and understanding. So you teach age appropriately. For a kindergarten, just understanding that their body is their body and that they should love and care for their body, and that when they interact with other people, they should have respect for other people's bodies. That's a very basic thing, but it's all part of sexual education. It's the way we interact and be with one another, but it's age appropriate. The other thing that we teach, we have it value-based. It's based in a set of values. And those values are shared with the educators that we're training. It is shared with the parents of the young adults that will take the curriculum and take the training. So they understand we are values-based, and these are some of the values that we share. So some of the values, and Melissa, you can chime in: self-worth, responsibility, inclusion and justice, inclusivity and justice.
And respect.
Self-respect, self-awareness, responsibility, sexual health, reproduction. These are core basic values and core basic issues that we teach about in this curriculum. Again, parents have to sign off to allow their children to participate in the Our Whole Lives programs at their congregations, if it's held at a church or in the communities in which it is held. So parents have to sign off. But here's the core thing. In this curriculum, Our Whole Lives, Sexuality and Our Faith, we consistently say the following: parents are the primary sexuality educator of their children. Parents and caregivers and guardians are the primary sexuality educator of the children in their care. We share information, but we do not take away the parental caregiving ownership and responsibility for educating the children. So whatever we teach, what is taught at home is primary, and we share what we're teaching. And when the parent signs off, they're suggesting that they align with the values that we teach. Those are core things. So it is right and proper for caregivers and adults with children in their care to be concerned and want to know what's being shared. But there also is a responsibility to recognize that information is power, and withholding information can be detrimental. And the reason we talk about comprehensive sexuality education in this conversation is we want our people to be empowered and informed and knowledgeable. The final core value and the final thing that we always teach in every aspect of our curriculum, Our Whole Lives, Melissa, tell me if I'm right or wrong, is consent. Consent. Consent on how you will or will not interact with my body and how I will or will not interact with your body. In the absence of consent, harm is done. What would that do around HIV and AIDS? It would indeed impact prevalence and the spread of HIV infection. If we understand that having conversation around what I will or will not consent to, because my body is valuable and your body is valuable. My life is valuable and your life is valuable.
Amen.
So I guess, Melissa, the final question as we finish is this: in what ways are communities of faith doing, thinking, and feeling with regard to HIV and AIDS in a life-giving way? Doing, thinking, and feeling with regard to HIV and AIDS in a life-giving way.
Some of us are brave enough to have the conversation. And for some people, that's a big step.
Mm-hmm.
So, so for us in the virtual faith community, I I am mindful of that and intentional about making sure people know that Holy Ground is a radically inclusive space for that. So having a conversation, of course, is enough. And tomorrow we'll be having a worship service that really shows you how you can have a faith experience that feels like a church, if you will, to some people, with the preacher and the music and a litany, and we have revised our faith statement, which will be shared tomorrow to include people impacted by HIV and AIDS. So putting it out there, putting it on paper, putting it on your website, having the conversation. And if you're brave enough, inviting someone to your faith space to talk for you, because I am mindful that some of us faith leaders think we know everything, and there are some things you can't school people on. So being okay with releasing some of this power that you have and allowing someone else, creating space for someone else to come in and share some facts. Because nowadays we have to be about life. We have to do things that are life giving. And that's why when I thought about treatment and prevention and our bodies, come on, it's so many things we could talk about when it comes to our bodies. So the faith space is a space where most of us listen. So making that space. I'll have a graphic tomorrow that says get tested, you know, putting it out there. It will be part of our graphics moving forward as we have our holy experiences. It will be get tested. You are worthy. You are sacred, you know? So sometimes people just have to see it in a different way in order to feel it, in order to know that people do care about them, or just a reminder of what they need to do to take care of themselves. So that's what we're doing at Holy Ground.
I say, man, uh, is that for all of us? I'll be glad how nurturing relationships and partnerships, I believe, um, fostered a space where conversations, we can dare to be transparent, we can dare to be authentic, we can dare to share resources. And we aren't in competition with each other, we're in collaboration with one another. Sharing the models of care event that we did last month, or participating and being present, um, where people would, we were hosted on the college campus at Johnson C. Smith University to talk about HIV and AIDS. We had resources, caregivers, and lay leaders, and we had a diverse participant in the audience. And as we nurture relationships and share, when we share about our experience, for example, with the Minority AIDS Project, which has been going to, when we share and help one another evolve organizations as well, when we see each other as partners rather than competitors, we move forward in ways that will impact HIV and board. I think that is so important going forward.
I don't know how much more I can add to that. Um, the one thing I can say, if there was more Reverend Melissa McQueen-Simmons and more Dr. Sonja Lee and more of Reverend Cedric Harmon, then I think we would progress much better in this faith community. Having reverends and pastors are who see the importance of this work and the importance of the stuff we're talked about body positivity and inclusiveness. Um, those type things I think are what's going to happen, and I think reverends like you having those conversations with others, with colleagues. I will use the word colleagues if that's the appropriate word. Um, having those conversations, because I think, as I mentioned before, it's going to be very important for the faith-based community to be involved in getting rid of um, and new infections of HIV.
All right, Reverend Melissa, Reverend Pastor Sonja, Jeff, it has been my pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to share in this panel discussion. Reverend Melissa, I hope that we have provided what you intended and that we have spoken to your audience and those that will watch later in a way that decreases stigma but increases the sacredness of our lives, our full thriving, of all who are impacted, all who may be infected with HIV at this time in our lives. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you all for your sharing, your wisdom, your presence. I know this will be something that can help anybody. As we move forward as a HIV and faith affirming space, I'm grateful for each of you and your sharing. And if any of you all out there looking for a home, a faith home, a spiritual home, I would love to be your virtual pastor or your spiritual director to guide you on this journey. Know that you are loved, know that you are sacred, know that you are needed in this world. And Jeff and Sonja and Cedric, thank you all for the wonderful work you do when it comes to humankind. And I'm with Jeff. If we had more people like y'all, this world could be almost amazing. Because, it's always the adversary, but, thank you all for everything you do and the things and the work that you are doing in this world. And if there's anything you would like to share with Holy Ground, we have space for you to come and share, especially when you know that there are trends happening that we need to know about. If you want to send in a video, something, we can make sure it is shared through our Holy Grounders. So thank you all. And for everyone else, join us tomorrow as we have our Holy Experience Christian edition with Bishop-elect Roger Billingsley Hayes out of Winston-Salem at Renewal UCC. It's going to be great. We have music from Roderick with the Three Kings as he and his group shared for Resurrection Sunday. And we have Kay Shantae offering a selection as well. So you know how we do. Thank you for joining us. And know that we are here. Blessings to you on your journey.